of the rim. Got it! Oh, the slam! Oh, using Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry!
During this recent playoff run, when it still seemed like there was a possibility Boston would make their second straight finals appearance, I had a thought. Boy, this is difficult. Of course, I wasn't out there playing or anything. I was simply witnessing the amount of trouble my team was having figuring things out on any consistent basis. Basic defensive lapses on one play leading to game and possible series altering decisions, uncharacteristic shooting stretches from players who were completely throwing game plans over the top rope, games being way closer than they had any business being and just going down to the wire, 50-50 situations. All of this to maybe earn a second straight finals berth after years of trying to make the finals at all. Then it hit me. LeBron James did this 8 straight times. The reaction a lot of you probably just had to that statement is the whole reason why I wanted to make this video in the first place, because especially while those runs were happening, we all had something to say about it in the moment. Oh, the East is weak, he couldn't do the same thing in the West, his team is stacked compared to the opposition a majority of the time. And for what it's worth, I actually do agree with some of these statements to an extent. But even the attempt at going twice in a row gave me more respect for his accomplishments, so today I am going to go through why I believe those 8 straight finals appearances are more impressive than you remember. First off, if you've been paying close attention over the last few seasons, you might notice how circumstantial almost every playoff run is, no matter how stacked the teams are. A Kyrie ankle injury being the difference between losing in the second round and probably a championship, a random Giannis fall on his back influencing the momentum of a series, hell, any of the last 3 Kawhi injuries robbing his team from a legitimate shot at the finals. Point here is, every single postseason for any team can change for the slightest reason at any moment. And after witnessing the toll those were taking at the beginning of this year's playoffs, I couldn't help but think about how this common issue did not derail LeBron in the East even once for those appearances. Never mind the fact that when they did happen, it was never to him. He was playing until June every year and somehow just went through these playoffs without missing games. But let's go through the times it did happen at all. In 2012, Chris Bosh got hurt in the second round on a Heat team that was relatively thin to accommodate their contracts. Then James put out Herculean effort specifically against the Boston Celtics to help them narrowly escape a series they likely would have dominated if fully healthy. In 2015, Kevin Love got his arm taken off at the very beginning of the postseason, and then Kyrie limped through the rest of that Eastern run. The second round against the Bulls? That's a series I specifically felt he might lose because of how things were going, and instead he gave us more legendary moments at a time when they were on the brink of going down 3-1. It would be convenient to remind you here that when the Cavaliers were already short-handed, J.R. Smith also missed the first 2 games of this series, so it was very winnable for Chicago. Those are probably the only real examples of times that these type of things could have done his squad in, but let's combine that with all the times the series could have changed based on a few plays. Of course, we just discussed 2015 and 2012, but in 2013, they got into a 7-game series with the upstart Pacers, who very nearly stole both of Miami's home games, which likely would have changed the complexion of the series. They just narrowly escaped that fate by a game-winning layup from James in Game 1. In 2018, they got into what I remember to be a classic matchup with Oladipo's Pacers with what I believe to be LeBron's worst team since the 2007 run. You can find multiple examples of plays, including Game 7, that could have swung it Indiana's way, but instead Cleveland just barely escaped at the last minute. Just a short time later, he would face his first 2-0 playoff series deficit in the East since 2008 against the Celtics, going against the Celtics. Of course, you'll recall that Kyrie and Hayward didn't play, which would have definitely been enough to change the outcome. However, it still required multiple outrageous performances from James to win it, including the nail-biter Game 7. After playing all 48 minutes and nearly posting a 30-point triple-double, that picture of him roaring to the Boston crowd is etched in all of our memories. That was a 3-point game with around 3 minutes left and very easily could have swung the Celtics' way, yet he survived as he'd done so many times for the 8th instance in a row. That means in 2012, 13, 15, and 18, due to either injuries or extremely close series and games, LeBron's 8 straight finals feat was in serious jeopardy. But every single time, he and his crew just somehow figured it out. The impressive part about that isn't necessarily the teams that he's played, it's that the other teams never prospered in those 50-50 situations. He could have lost to the Pacers in 2013, made all the other finals that he ended up making, and still 8 straight wouldn't be a thing. That's where we visit the team strength criticism, because it is certainly valid. Outside of 2018, he pretty much always at very least had one other top player with him, and the East outside of that wasn't very good despite any revisionist history you may have seen lately. While Lob City and the defending champion Spurs were duking it out in the first round, he was crushing Isaiah Thomas's Celtics. While the Warriors and Kawhi Spurs were on a collision course in 2017 that may have been something if it weren't for injury, the biggest potential threat to the Cavs were thought to be Wall and Beal, who had absolutely no real success to show for at that point. I say all this to say, I hear you. That Eastern Conference is not the one we've had since 2019. However, that does not do enough to discount how ridiculous it is to be able to survive all the moments for that amount of time that usually end up wearing contending teams down. Boston last year ended up eking out a finals appearance after avoiding a potentially legendary Jimmy Butler shot. This year, they barely forced a Game 7 against the Sixers where they were successful, barely took Miami to 7 after one of the most dramatic game winners ever, then finally ran out of gas at home. Maybe somehow they'll make the finals next year. You know what they won't have though? Consecutive finals appearances. This is without mentioning that in 2022 and 2023, both the second and third rounds were Game 7s. Even making the conference finals in 2020 required a Game 7. We've already been through 2018 Game 7. Sometimes they win them, sometimes they don't. That's what happens to normal teams and normal players. Milwaukee had their own health ailments in the 2021 run, then didn't have Chris Middleton at all for 2022, which was ultimately their downfall. They're still trying to get it together to scale that mountain once again. The Miami Heat took 2 years to make it back to the finals and have faced injuries in both 23 and 22 that threatened their runs. The Nets literally imploded after not winning in 21 because of, well, creative differences between personalities on the roster and injuries. Did all these take place in a more competitive conference? Absolutely. Did all of these teams also face one or more of the same circumstances that LeBron teams faced at any point during those years? Absolutely. Injuries? Check. Wildly close games that change a series, 50-50 situations? Check. Creative differences that cause a team to implode and threaten to ruin its season? Also check. At one point or another from 2011 to 2018, these things happened to a LeBron James team, and that's why I believe despite the criticisms, those consecutive finals appearances are more impressive than you remember.